Hi, I'm Kenneth C. Davis, and I am the author of Don't Know Much About History and other books in the Don't Know Much About series, as well as other books about history. I try and make the stuff you thought was very boring back in high school a little bit more fun and interesting because it is very important. If you go back a little over 240 years ago to those guys sitting down in Philadelphia, locked doors, closed windows, completely secret, writing the U.S. Constitution, one of the things that scared them most was the idea of the president getting too much power. They were afraid of a king, a democratically elected king. And so that's why at every step along the way, they put in what we think of as checks and balances. They wanted to separate powers, and they wanted a balance of power so the president didn't have too much power. But they gave him some very fundamental powers. First, right at the top of the list, he's commander-in-chief. But even there, he's commander-in-chief, but only Congress could declare war. So we've been having an argument about that for 240 years. When can the president, send troops in? What is Congress's role in determining that? Of course, the president gets to make appointments, like appointments to the Supreme Court, and we are in the midst of that tremendous issue right now. And this might actually be the most important power a president ultimately has. When you think about a president like Ronald Reagan or Barack Obama today, they are there for 8 years and then they're gone. Their powers are over. But the people they've put on the Supreme Court could be there for 10, 20, 30 years, as in the case of Justice Scalia recently. So this is a long-lasting power. You go back to the very beginning of the Supreme Court. John Adams appointed a man named John Marshall to be the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. By the way, a true lame duck appointment. He was on his way out of office when he made that appointment. But Justice Marshall led the court for 35 years, created the powers of the Supreme Court. So the power to nominate and name someone to the Supreme Court, as well as other positions in the government, of course, is one of the president's most important powers. The power to sign bills or not sign them. Congress is supposed to enact legislation, and the president either signs it or he can veto it or not sign it. So though, again, balance of powers, each of the three branches of government, executive, the president, judicial, the Supreme Court, and the legislative, the Congress, has powers, and at every point there's supposed to be some check against that, so no one acquires those dictatorial powers that we are so afraid of. A couple more of the president's powers. Obviously, he has the power to make treaties, overseas treaties. This was because they didn't want Congress to start negotiating with foreign powers. That had to be centralized in one office. But then Congress, through the Senate, has the power to approve or not approve those treaties. So this was a very carefully constructed idea of giving the president certain powers and then putting checks and balances on them at every step. Now, the one thing that's probably the most controversial right now is the idea of executive powers. We sometimes hear about it in executive orders. It's not really clearly laid out in the Constitution what those are and what those limits are. So, for instance, Obama has made a number of executive orders recently, some of which have been challenged in court, and that's the way those powers can be checked as well. So the president has a lot of power, obviously not unlimited power, as the framers of the Constitution intended it 240 odd years ago.